Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Alistair Waddell, who's the president and CEO at Inflection Resources and also the chairman at Headwater Gold, who are both junior explorers working across Australia and the US, focusing on high-grade precious metals and copper assets. Alistair is an exploration geologist by background, and he's worked sort of all over the world in Australia, South America, North America, and he's here today to talk about some exciting projects he is involved in. So let's welcome Alistair to the podcast. How you doing, Alistair?
Very well, Rob. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no worries. Appreciate your time as well. So as we always start all these podcasts off, I just wondered if you can give us a background about yourself. I know you've had we were just obviously speaking off air before we started recording. You've had a varied background working all around the world. So yeah, I just wondered if you can give us, tell us a little bit about your career for those people that don't know you.
Absolutely. So originally from the UK, but pretty much left straight after university. So I studied geology at university after doing geology A-level as well, which is I think peculiar to the United Kingdom. And then literally straight after pretty much my final exams, I was ready to start working, and I got myself a one-way ticket to Perth in Australia. And a story a little bit similar to some of your previous guests. I turned up in Perth with a CV with nothing on it, and started looking for work. And at that time, this is obviously pre-internet. This is the mid 90s. I had the yellow pages, and I literally started wandering around West Perth and St. George's Terrace, knocking on doors almost at random. And obviously knew of a few big mining groups and whatnot, but really didn't have a lot of knowledge of Australian mining companies at the time. So I immediately stumbled into a job. I initially worked for Stockdale Prospecting, which is De Beers arm in Australia. And I went from doing my final exams in the UK to flying around the desert in Western Australia, looking for diamonds in about a month. And it sort of all started there. So I initially started my career in diamonds with De Beers, and then went to work for another company, Ashton Mining. It was also in diamonds. Worked an advanced stage project up in the Northern Territory of Australia called the Merlin Project. And then after about a year or so of doing that, my visa in Australia expired, and left Australia. And at that time, it was kind of a crossroads. I'd ultimately decided where I wanted to go, and I'd really just planned to spend basically a year backpacking back to the UK, and probably apply to get a proper visa to go back to Australia and work. And I spent several months backpacking, and went through Asia, and then in a roundabout sort of way, as you do when you're 23 years old, I flew to Brazil from Thailand, and started touring around South America, and stumbled into Santiago, and specifically at that time in sort of, this would be 96, I guess it would have been. There was a bit of a mining boom, and ultimately people said, "Oh, you've got to go to Peru." Peru was booming in the mid 90s, and there was a lot of activity there, and hadn't even thought about working in the mining business in South America at that time. But people said, go up to Peru, you'll get a job immediately. So jumped on the bus, went from Chile on my way to Peru, and stopped off in Bolivia, and stumbled into a job there, and worked for a Canadian junior exploration company, and spent a year working in Bolivia. So this was mid 90s, 96, 97. Bre-X happened, and the market completely fell apart at that time, and the company was acquired, the junior company was acquired by a small US miner called Grengas, which became Vista Gold, and they shipped me off to Venezuela. And again, just jumped on a plane, went to Venezuela. I was working in Venezuela for a year, which was a spectacular experience, and kind of sheltered to what was going on in the rest of the world in terms of the mining business, but out in the virgin jungle and rainforest of Venezuela at the time. And And then the effects of Bre-X really kicked in. Gold was at an all-time low. The job market was terrible, and finally the company gave up on the project in Venezuela. So I was out of work, and at that point I jumped on a flight and went to Lima, Peru, and like before, started knocking on doors, and ultimately got a job with a Canadian junior. Did that for a while, and finally they kind of succumbed to the market effects of Bre-X, and it was just a really terrible time in the business for those that were there, if you're in the exploration side of the business. And then I managed to get a job with Minorco, which was the precursor to Anglo American, and that very quickly transitioned into Anglo American, Anglo Gold. So I went to the Anglo Gold side, and we're doing big generative programs in Peru and whatnot. So I spent about 4 years living in Peru, and at that time, I guess that would be around about 2001. I was approached by one of my bosses at Anglo Gold, who'd been looking in the Dominican Republic. There's a very big gold deposit there called Pueblo Viejo, and he'd done a deep dive on Pueblo Viejo, and it was owned by the Dominican government. And at that time, done a lot of diligence on the country and jurisdiction in terms of the mining code and obviously the exploration potential and things like that. And 2001, with a couple of other Anglo Gold senior guys, we set up a junior company called GoldQuest. And that was for about 10 years. I was working with GoldQuest in different roles, ultimately the CEO, but that brought me to Canada, and came up to Canada in the sort of last 5 years of my time at GoldQuest, and a great experience, first real exposure to the capital market side of the business, but a tough game, and then ultimately in about 2010, at this point, I got approached by Kinross Gold, who just acquired Aurelian Resources in Ecuador. This is a very high grade, spectacular discovery. It was very high profile and very exciting, and I'd been a small investor in it at the time and done reasonably well and things. And it was something I'd been following very closely. And I joined Kinross at that time, and shipped myself and my family down to Quito, Ecuador. We lived in Ecuador for about a year, and then had different roles within Kinross. Managed exploration in South America, including around the mines and new exploration opportunities, and ultimately ended up looking at more of a global greenfields role. So looking at a lot of early stage exploration opportunities in different parts of the world, and did that to around about 2015. And then I joined a little Australian group called Kingsgate with assets in Chile and a mine in Thailand. And I joined the group about 2 months before the mine in Thailand was denied a key permit, and the wheels came off the bus a little bit there. And then at the end of 2017, I was kind of looking for something to do, and I was looking at a lot of different opportunities and kicking a lot of tires, looking at projects. I definitely wanted to build my own junior exploration company at that time. And that's ultimately when this opportunity that ultimately became Inflection Resources came across my desk, and that was late 2017, early 2018.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting career and varied career, and especially yourself at the beginning, just making that jump to Australia. I mean, if I was a mine engineer or a geologist, that's probably the approach that I would have taken. Just jump to a country like Australia and try and find work. You're like, obviously initially it's like a traveling geologist, but I suppose you just took yourself and put yourself in that position where you didn't have a job, and you try to create a job for you by knocking on doors. Is that advice that you would give sort of young geologists that are, especially if they're out of the UK where there isn't necessarily work here, Would you advise them to do what you did, or would you say prepare a little bit more?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'd encourage any young geologist to get out and travel, before, life gets more complicated and, you have mortgages and families and whatnot. It's something absolutely I'd do. And, they worked very well for me. I mean, it was very much, I was just very ready to leave the UK, and I needed to work. I didn't have any money, and I wanted to travel, and I was just ready to go. And yes, I couldn't recommend it enough. Really, just get out. And at that time, knocking on the doors was one of the few avenues really that was available. There was we weren't able to Google things and research really in a lot of detail and whatnot. So it worked very well for me, and I would encourage any young geologist to get out and travel, and get that experience on your CV, and ultimately get exposure to many different deposit types, different people, different jurisdictions. If you've got that sort of traveling explorationist sort of spirit, absolutely, I would recommend it all day long.
Yeah, certainly. And like you said, it wasn't only one time that you did it. You went over to South America and done exactly the same. So obviously you had it in you, but it just shows that if you put yourself out there, put yourself in front of people, anything can happen. And sometimes it is a numbers game, which I tell any graduates or recent graduates that are looking for work. Sometimes you just need to take that leap of faith, and put yourself out there.
Absolutely. And look, I would very much recommend that. And in my experience, the young geologists that have made it out on their own dollar to certain places of the world, maybe they turned up in Peru or Perth or wherever, actively looking for work themselves. And those are individuals that invariably, in my experience at least, have been quite successful in the business. They've got a bit of drive and perseverance, and not just sitting there sending out CVs. And it says a lot, I think, about a person if they're prepared to do that. But in my case, it was really out of necessity, and it was just very opportunistic, and literally going from exploring for diamonds to gold to base metals. I mean, it was just in the sort of the mid to late 90s. It was such an awful time in the industry for young geologists that he was really just taking whatever job was available at the time. And unfortunately, a lot of the people that at my age that I was sort of working with or got to know in different parts of the world, particularly in Peru, I mean, a lot of them just left the business. They were 3 or 4 years out of university, and ultimately, they were still early enough in their career that they switched out and went and did something completely different. And there was quite a lot of those. So if you look at the demographics of the exploration business, there's a sort of a bit of a gap of geologists in the sort of the late 40s, mostly because of that pre-ex situation in the late 90s.
Yeah. Just wondering if you can give us, moving on, wondering if you can give us an overview of Inflection Resources.
Yeah, absolutely. So Inflection Resources, it's focused in Eastern Australia. We've got 2 major initiatives. The big one is exploring for copper, gold, alkalic porphyry systems in northern New South Wales. And this has really been the focus of the company for the last couple of years. And then we've got a second project up in far north Queensland called Karen, which is exploring for high-grade gold adjacent to a historic gold mining camp called the Croydon Goldfields. But I'll talk to New South Wales. It's really been the focus of the work. So really how this opportunity arose was a proposal put together by a well-known Australian geologist called Dr. Douglas Haines. And Douglas Haines is well known because he was the chief geoscientist for big Australian mining group called Western Mining, which was a very successful exploration and mining group, and for many, many years made a number of big discoveries and developed a number of big mines in Australia. And Douglas was really there through the golden years of Western Mining, up to the point where it was acquired by BHP and involved a lot of big discoveries, including the likes of Olympic Dam. So Douglas had a proposal, a relatively simple proposal in terms of the concept, but complex in the details. He wanted to explore the northern extension of a belt of volcanic rocks, or mostly volcanic rocks, called the Macquarie Arc. And this is a belt of rocks which extends through sort of central, well, it extends through New South Wales and into sort of southern Queensland. And it's host to a number of very big mines. The big one in the belt is Newcrest Cadia Valley operations. This is Australia's biggest gold mine, in fact. The other one is Evolution Mining's Lake Cowal mine. And the third big one is North Park's mine. This is a joint venture between China Moly and Sumitomo, and this is a big block cave underground copper mine. But in addition to that, there's a whole series of other smaller mines and mineral occurrences. It's a very well mineralized part of the planet. But critically, this belt of rocks extends under a younger post-mineral sedimentary cover. So these sediments are masking the prospective mineralized geology underneath these sediments. So it's flat terrain, there's no outcrop, but clearly the volcanic rocks extend under this sedimentary sequence. So what Douglas had proposed was using data collected by the government of New South Wales. So this is a big regional airborne magnetic survey. And what this did, it highlighted the extent of the volcanics under this sedimentary sequence. And Douglas built this beautiful geological map, or an interpretive geological map, extrapolating the geology from the known to the unknown, all the way under this sedimentary sequence for about 250 kilometers. And in addition to that, he'd identified at the time around, I think it was 21 very large features in the region magnetics, which he considered analogous with these different types of deposits, but mostly porphyry type systems by way of alteration and key features he could recognize in the magnetics. So this is what really started this whole journey. But critically, these targets were on open ground, so they were claim-free. And that was really the opportunity. And it was exciting in the fact that we were 2, 3, 4 hours up the road from Australia's biggest gold mine on a paved highway. We're not doing this in the jungles of Ecuador and some other crazy jurisdiction. This was a very simple story, and certainly in concept. I mean, it was all about the details of how you specifically target these features. But that was the exciting opportunity. It was a very mining friendly jurisdiction, obviously encouraging investment in mining exploration. And critically, the prize was very large. If we're successful in discovering one of these deposits, I mean, they're generally very large. And that was kind of the secret, because ultimately we had to design an exploration program to explore through cover. So we needed something big. We need something that's really going to move the needle in a massive way to justify exploring through a sedimentary sequence. And how we're doing that, we're using a fairly old technology. We're using mud rotary drilling. So this is technology mostly used for drilling water wells. And ultimately, we drill down through the sedimentary sequence. We drill short diamond drill holes at the bottom of these mud rotary holes. So we cut through the sediments, just hit the bedrock. And if we're not seeing what we need to see in terms of favorable alteration or geochemistry or mineralization, then we move on. So it's a very disciplined and aggressive approach to greenfields exploration, but the discipline is really in being able to walk away from a specific target if we're not seeing key characteristics. So we've got 35 targets, and we've been systematically drilling those. And we've got a number of early stage targets that return very encouraging results in terms of anomalous geochemistry and favorable alteration, but we've not yet drilled into the heart of one of these systems. And that's kind of the challenge, is being able to vector into where we need to be. But we believe drilling just 2 to 3 holes into each of these individual targets is a fairly unique strategy in many respects. It's a very cost-effective way of drilling a lot of different targets. But it's also very much a portfolio approach. If we were to stake drill test 1 or 2 targets, the chances of failure are very, very high. But we believe having sort of 35 of these targets, it kind of tilts the odds of success in our favor. So it's really, we're systematically just working our way through these targets right now, just doing this sort of first pass drilling plus a series of follow-up drill holes on targets that returned encouraging results to date. But it's an exciting program from an exploration geologist. I mean, every hole is drilling something big and probably altered that's never been drill tested before, and that's really the key. Is the size of the prize is potentially very large, but also virgin targets never been drilled before. We made a very conscious decision not to drill all prospects that have been drilled perhaps many times before, and people have walked away from various reasons. So we're really having a swing, trying to make a true greenfields discovery in a belt known for big mines. Yeah.
Considering you work for both sort of major mining companies and junior explorers, can you tell us the major differences for working in each of those types of companies? Obviously, you're working for a junior explorer now. How different is it, and how difficult as well would you say? What are the main key characteristics would make it a lot different and maybe harder or maybe easier?
Both very different experiences. From my perspective, I enjoy both for different reasons. The major mining company, as an exploration geologist, you get exposure to a lot of great people. So, the leading consultants, whether they be geologists or geochemists, geophysicists. So you're always getting exposure to that. But you also get an appreciation for scale. Really, sometimes on the junior company side of things, you forget what a really big mine looks like. And you work for a big major mining company, then you really get to see what the significance of an alteration footprint. So you're looking for something big. That's something that's perhaps lost, is the appreciation of scale. The junior company side is in many respects a bit more exciting. You very much perhaps control a little bit more of your own destiny in many respects. It's if the company falls over, it is on you ultimately. The challenges are more, frankly, on the capital market side. You're the women at the markets and being able to raise capital at the right time. And there's an element of luck, I think, associated with that. You can have some great projects and great assets, and ultimately the timing is a little bit off, and you do big financings at the wrong time and things like that. So, that's always a challenge on the junior side of things, and you get an appreciation for, the value of the capital invested as well. I mean, that's every dollar very much counts as a junior explorer, but often a little bit more flexible and a bit more dynamic. Probably the decision-making process is very quick on the junior company side of things versus the major miners, which can be a little bit slower, to say the least. But yeah, look, there's both good points and bad points, and I'd encourage anybody getting into the business to try and get a little bit of exposure to both sides of it. Because if you're just doing one, if you've only ever worked for a major gold mining company, you perhaps don't appreciate some of the things you go through on the junior side, and vice versa. If you've only ever worked for junior explorers, you miss out on a lot of things, and even just basic things, how to manage data and store data. Just how to properly process core and log core. These are procedures that are being worked out in great details with the majors and whatnot. So I'm a big fan of geologists that have done both in many respects.
Yeah. What do you look for when you hire geologists for a junior exploration company like Inflection? Are there any particular characteristics that you look for? Is there a commonality in terms of your criteria?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like just as I mentioned, I mean, I'm a fan of having geologists that have been exposed to both sides of it. for the reasons I mentioned with the majors in particular. You've just got that appreciation of scale and how ultimately the majors operate, and also you get a sense for what the majors are looking for, and how they reach their decisions on whether they proceed with a project or drop it. I mean, a major mining company might just test one project with one single drill hole and test the thesis and drop it, whereby the junior might push it further and things like that. So I like geologists that have done both for the reasons that have had exposure, but I also look for geologists that have got that little bit extra. And we've got geologists as part of our group that have just got that little bit of extra spark, and maybe they've got a little bit of an entrepreneurial twang to them. It's difficult to put your finger on it, but when you meet lots of geologists, you kind of recognize the geologists that have it, and they've just got that little bit of an extra entrepreneurial sort of attitude to them. And invariably, there are people that have got they've gone out and traveled a little bit, and a commonality would be they're generally sort of outdoorsy types. They like camping and climbing and fishing and hunting and that sort of thing. So that's generally a theme. And self-driven people, that you don't need to tell what to do all the time as well. That's kind of key. So geologists have just got to get a little bit of get up and go about them.
Yeah. Can you introduce us to Inflection Resources and tell us why a Canadian company is it obviously exploring in New South Wales in Australia, and obviously you're based in Canada? How comes you're based there, operation or exploring in Australia? And how do you find that with time differences?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so it was very opportunistic, and as I mentioned, it was a proposal by Douglas Haines, and I was really looking for some key things, and ultimately looking for an asset that the majors would want to buy. So as a junior explorer, really thinking about the exit here, and I wanted a fabulous mining-friendly jurisdiction. You want to be able to go to bed at night and wake up knowing that you still own the assets in the morning. That's kind of a key thing. Non-technical risk. I'd spent a lot of years working in some questionable jurisdictions, and now I've come sort of full circle, and I love the US and Canada and Australia and places like that. So it was about jurisdiction. Douglas Haines, who I mentioned, he really leapt off the page, and the interpretive work that Douglas had done with this extrapolation of the favorable geology undercover, it was a spectacular piece of work. So it was really that, and the nature of the prize as well. It was really targeting copper gold, which really is can't go wrong with that. It's big commodity types that the majors are looking for, long life mines potentially, and in a belt of rocks known for big mines. So those were the sort of tick the major boxes. And in terms of the time zones and things, based in Vancouver to Eastern Australia, it's generally pretty good. I mean, it's from about 2 o'clock in the afternoon here, the guys are up and about, and it's been relatively easy. Makes for some late evenings sometimes, but for the most part, it's been pretty seamless. And I will say the majority of the team is based in Australia. So it's really myself and a couple of others here at a corporate level that are impacted by that. But for the most part, it's been pretty seamless. And the same with COVID. The one issue we've had with COVID is we've obviously not been able to enter Australia due to their border restrictions. But luckily, our entire team, our technical team, really is on the ground in New South Wales and Queensland. So it's been pretty seamless in that respect.
Yeah. How do you obviously you're an experienced geologist. How do you migrate risk in exploration, particularly as you're focused on greenfields exploration rather than exploring sort of known projects, which might be considered more advanced stage and perhaps lower risk?
Yeah, so this is I talk about this quite a lot. I mean, how you manage greenfields risk versus brownfields risk, and it's a great discussion. And I forget how many times I've been approached by groups. I'm looking for an advanced stage exploration asset, something that's got some drill holes into it, something that's been de-risked. Well, probably the issue with that is, the cost of entry is generally quite high. If there's something that's got a resource on it or some significant drill holes in it, it's invariably available for various reasons. It might have an issue with it. Take your pick. It could be a community issue, a metallurgical issue, a grade issue. There's a reason why somebody's walked away from this project in the past, and the chances are those issues have not gone away. So, the issue of risk is something that really people perhaps don't appreciate as much. And particularly on the greenfield side, I get this, people say, "Oh, greenfields is high risk." Well, using Inflection as an example, so we've got a large portfolio of projects in New South Wales, which we can drill test very cost effectively. Now, the key is the size of the prize. If we can test one of our targets for, let's say $75,000, I think that's a great result. If you can develop a project, drill test it, and walk away from it, and this is a target that's got real scale or the potential to deliver a major discovery, that's a very cost-effective way of testing that. So I'd rather do that all day long than drill test some old project that's been drilled many, many times before that's failed for whatever reason. But certainly, putting my Inflection hat on, it comes back to having a large number of targets as well. And really, as I mentioned earlier, it's having over 30 targets. I think the odds of success are very much in our favor, and each one of those targets has got the potential to deliver a discovery. So it's really how you perceive risk. You might wish to pay a lot more and acquire an advanced stage asset, or drill something and bring it to a decision very, very quickly and potentially walk away, or make a large discovery. So that's the sort of the trade-off. Not for everybody. People want different types of exposure to different types of exploration projects, but I'm certainly very comfortable taking a swing on greenfields targets, got the potential to deliver a large or tier one, potentially tier one type discovery.
Yeah. Would you say most geologists have that point of view? I suppose if you look at other explorers, depending on who the CEO is, whether they're from a geology background or may have another discipline, would you say most geologists would have a similar opinion to yourself?
Maybe not. Maybe not. I've got a high conviction that this is the right strategy, and I'm very comfortable managing the technical aspect of exploration risk. But it's more on the financial community. People often say, I would like a project, with something a bit more advanced. This is a phrase you hear a lot, and it drives me crazy, to be honest. That project has probably been around. It's probably been through multiple hands and failed for whatever reason. It might not, but often that's the case. And it's a bigger discussion about investing in the junior mining space. It's often quite challenging for non-technical to distinguish the difference between the projects that have been perhaps around a long time and drilled by multiple companies, than groups that are perhaps doing something new and a little bit different, but with the potential to deliver a real discovery.
Yeah. Can you tell us about your other project in Queensland called Karen? I think that's pronounced properly.
Yeah, Karen. So that's a project also generated by Dr. Douglas Haines. This case, we're up in far north Queensland, so we're about a 4-hour drive west of Cairns, if you know where that is. And we are targeting high-grade orogenic low gold veins in this particular case. And we're doing this adjacent to a very high-grade historic gold mining camp called the Croydon Goldfields. Now, Croydon was essentially mined out in the early 1900s. It's a classic old mining camp. There's a lot of black and white photos. If you were to Google Croydon, you'll see all sorts of black and white photos of old-timer miners with big gold bars and nuggets and things like this, but long since mined out. What Douglas Haines had recognized, and a little bit like New South Wales in some respects, was that sitting out under post-mineral sedimentary cover again, there looked to be the continuation of the Croydon system. And so this is looking at magnetics. So the Croydon veins broadly trend in a northwesterly direction, and sitting out under the sediments, these very dominant northwest trending features that we consider perhaps comparable to Croydon. And the interesting thing about these features is they extend over about 30 kilometers. So it's a big target, and it's never been drilled before. And the prize is potentially more Croydon-style veins. Now, key about these Croydon veins is they were very, very high grade, and the old timers were mining these veins. And if you read the historical reports, they're typically grading around about 30 grams or an ounce of gold. So, spectacularly high grade. So we're really looking for a repetition of the Croydon Goldfields undercover, and we're just about to commence drilling on that project any time now. And so that's something very much we're excited about. And that if we're looking up to tag into one of these systems over the 30 kilometers, then it'll be it could be quite spectacular. We certainly hope so anyway.
Yeah. You're also the chairman of Headwater Gold. So I just wonder if you can give our audience an overview of Headwater Gold.
Yeah, absolutely. So Headwater is kind of the sister company to Inflection in many ways, sort of a similar management structure, but it's this one is very much focused on high-grade epithermal veins in what we call the Great Basin area. So this is essentially Nevada, southern Idaho, and a little bit of southern Oregon as well. And this is was put together by a spectacular young geologist called Caleb Strope. He was one of the Kinross geologists that really was focused on generating new initiatives for Kinross. We convinced Caleb to join us a couple of years ago now, and built the company up in a privately for the first year or so, and then went public there earlier this year. But it's a fabulous company in the fact that it's again, just like Inflection, is generating own projects on open ground for the most part. We've got I think it's 12 projects in the company right now, and 11 of those we're literally sitting there just waiting to be staked. And Caleb and his team in Reno have just done a spectacular job of picking those up and building up a real good technical story around those. But the key with Headwater is the 100% ownership, which is quite unusual, particularly in Nevada, where there's often layered royalties and complex underlying ownership structures and things like that. We made a very conscious decision to stay away from that. We wanted a nice, clean, simple story, but also it's very focused, and we're exploring these low sulfidation vein systems that have perhaps had a few very shallow drill holes into them, looking for the upper parts of these epithermal systems. There's often a low-grade halo on top of these systems, and often or not, the real prize occurs at depth in the form of these very high-grade vein zones that, and often or not, these have not been drill tested. So that's really the thesis, and Caleb and the team are doing a spectacular job of systematically drill testing those targets in Idaho and Nevada at this time. So certainly one to keep an eye on.
Concluding, just wondering if you can give us a sort of short to medium term outlook for Inflection, what your plans are, over the next sort of 12 to 18 months.
Well, it's with Inflection, it's all about drilling. we're drilling aggressively in New South Wales. So we're doing two things. We're finishing off our first pass drilling across the portfolio targets in northern New South Wales. So these are big copper gold targets. And then we're also doing sort of step out drilling on targets that have returned encouraging alteration and geochemistry, with the goal of being able to pierce the bedrock and vector hopefully to one of these alkalic porphyry centers. So that's ongoing as we speak. And then in far north Queensland at our Karen project, we're just about to commence drilling our first pass program there. So we've got 25 targets identified so far on that property, spread out over about 30 kilometers. And the goal here is to drill about 9 to 11 holes here before the year end, and that'll continue into next year. But it's all about the drill, and we're very proud of the fact we're aggressively drilling and drilling things that have never been drilled before. Yeah,
Alistair, really appreciate your time. It seems you've got some exciting projects there, a lot of work in front of you, but a lot of prospect, obviously, of especially the operation in or the drilling in New South Wales, obviously surrounded by some great mines there. So look forward to seeing sort of further results as time goes on. If our audience wants to sort of reach out to you, if they've got any questions, how can they go about doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can reach me on my email. So it's alistair@inflectionresources.com. We've also obviously got websites at Inflection, and we're on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. But those are corporate accounts, and happy to answer any questions. Anybody's feel free to please reach out anytime.
Yeah, certainly. We can include those in the show notes accompanying this podcast. So, Alistair, really appreciate your time. Perhaps you can come on next year and give us an update. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of interesting news feed next year. So, yeah, more welcome to come back on and give us an update of the progress.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Appreciate if you can share and like this if you're watching on the YouTube channel, and obviously listen on any of the podcast platforms. As always, appreciate if you can pass this episode on, and also just make other people aware, maybe who you work with, about the podcast, because it is educational. And as Alistair pointed out at the beginning, especially for graduates looking to get their first job, there's a lot of a bit of content around that. So appreciate you all for listening. Keep sharing these, keep sharing the podcast, because obviously it's a lot of education and a lot of things to pick up on, and hopefully you can use in everyday life during your mining career. So until next time, happy mining.